So, are you living in Nantwich?
No, Manchester.
Oh, you actually live in Manchester.
Yeah, it's a hour commute to work, but
Okay.
we do half home, half in the studio. So
Oh,
I
that's all
know
right.
I know people don't know much about Manchester, which honestly I didn't either. But yeah, we find it to be really nice, actually, quite modern. It's like a little Brooklyn almost, if you've been.
Yeah. Ages ago. I've only been
Yeah,
once really, and I can't say that I experienced it properly because it was just for one night, and we went to some, I don't know, party, and I can't really say I saw much of the city. But
yeah,
dude, there's a really strong music scene in Manchester, and they've got like this rich music heritage, like Stone
yeah.
Roses, Oasis. Um, I think I speak under correction, but I want to say Joy Division, but I might get shot for saying the wrong thing. So, but there's a long list of great bands that have come out of Manchester. So yeah,
Yeah, apparently
it looked
Ed
great.
Sheeran is from around here.
I don't know. Well, I know that I'm not an expert on his biography, but I know that he lives in Suffolk, and
Hmm.
he might have grown up in Manchester, but I'm pretty sure that he lives in Suffolk now. So
Hmm.
I yeah, but yeah, I think you might be right. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
don't want
don't
to
know much
speak out of
about him,
turn here.
but he had a big concert here, and then it was like a big thing because he's like originally not from the city, but around here somewhere.
I'm with you. Got you.
Yeah.
Cool. Dude, I have to say that first of all, I'm a big fan of your work, dude. I really those kind of watercolor. I mean, the design projects that you've worked on, obviously as well, but like in terms of like sketching style, I really like those renders you do. This, especially the kind of the watercolor ones with the pencil in the background. Um, Big fan. Really, really cool.
Thank
Um,
you.
and and obviously, as I mentioned, you always looking fresh, always dressed to the nines, and that's
Thank
yeah, it's
you.
very impressive. No, dude, I look like shit half the time, dude. No, no, no. You've got a level of class to yourself that even some of the studio shots. Everybody's in jeans and t-shirts, and Yasu's there like fucking full Gucci'd up with the shirt, tie, three-piece suit, fresh walkers, and dude, you know what? That's kind of what that is for me. That is like wearing street stuff back in the day when everybody was wearing suits. It's really cool that you're doing that. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, it's yeah, I guess I'm a dreamer, so it's like, when you were still starting off and you wanted to be a car designer, back in the day you see all these pictures and that's what you saw, right? So it's kind of like I still have memories of that, and it's just how I imagined it would be. You know what I mean? But I think it's important for a designer to have their own style, rendering wise, design wise, taste wise. But I mean, you're a designer, so it's how you convey yourself as well. So it's just part of it, I think.
I I think it's very commendable, Yasu, and I think I've kind of been critical in the past about when it was a while ago now that I would open my mouth about this sort of thing, but you might see, I don't know, a bunch of, I won't name universities, but a bunch of students that are all like kind of dressed to the nines at university. And the reason why I might have said some derogatory things about it is because they all are kind of following each other and
Right.
and going like, oh, I'm studying car design, so now I need to dress a certain way. But what's really cool about you is that everybody, it's not unique now to wear hoodies and sneakers. Everybody's kind of doing that. So the fact that you've still stuck balls to the wall on like, I'm going to dress elegantly, that's a really cool thing. And it's, that's mega, because people are going to start doing that again now. I mean, I guess Bentley hasn't really ever gone street. I mean, I remember when I was there, I was only there for a short period, but the last time I was there, everybody was kind of dressed to the nines. So all monk strap shoes and waistcoats and all that sort of stuff. Don't know what it's like now, but I remember getting to when I went over to Europe, it was like completely the opposite. You know, as you know, and of course in those days it was like t-shirts were not really, they wouldn't really fly. Like nobody would give you shit, but they would kind of, you would get comments, and it would be made clear to you that, you need to make an effort. So, I would, at the time, I didn't really have any money, but I would try and dress as smart as I possibly could. I mean, with the casual element to it as well. So if people were wearing full suits, not everybody was wearing full suits, but I would, in those days anyway, like if on the weekend, especially in England, you generally made an effort, so you would have loafers, and like I've got a couple of really cool like velvet jackets, but there may be a t-shirt underneath, it was like more of a smart casual vibe. And, right. And also we had like a group of, I was doing Alias, and there was like some old boys, like old contractors that were just like, they didn't give a shit. So like if you made an effort, there would always be comments from them as well, like going like, oh, are you going for a job interview today? And I was like, just shut up, But and now I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say I dress street, because I've never really dressed street, but so to speak. But I've got, it's been very, very casual, and I would like to transition back to my old vibe again. But honestly, I've got so out of shape. I put on so much weight that sort of thing doesn't really work with me anymore. But the second part to that is I'm like on a massive health kick. Like I've hired a nutritionist and a trainer and whatever, and I've just like 5 weeks into that program, and it's going great, and I feel better for it as well. Not just physically, good, but mentally as well. And then of course, with kids and stuff, you don't want to be the like loser dad that's just smashing KFC on the couch every night. You want to make an effort. So I'm very much focused on getting healthy and getting in shape. It's a long journey, because I've just been so careless for such a long time. It's literally, I don't know, sitting in a desk as well has not helped, but I also got into really bad habits with regard to eating and stuff like that. So I've time for a change.
Yeah, that's the danger in our industry.
Yeah, and I guess with being a designer, or I don't know, if to a large degree, like, I don't know, a program manager or somebody like that, at least you've generally got quite a lot more freedom with regard to walking around. I mean, depending on what studio you're in, I mean, there's certain places where it was kind of like, if you're the Alias modeler, if you get up too many times, people are like going like, are you gonna do something? Can you like, and you would get away with going to go check the clay out and stuff like that, but there's only so much you can do with that, whereas like if you're a designer and you are developing a body side or a volume with on a full scale, you're standing around the clay, and at least that's a lot better, so yeah, it's I don't know, it has this knock-on effect, I think if I was sitting down and still eating right, it would have been okay. But dude, honestly, I got really I did so many bad things with regard to just not looking after myself. So time to focus on being healthy. Health is wealth.
Yeah.
Dude, so as per we spoke briefly yesterday, and I knew that there was a Japanese connection, but I didn't realize that you grew up in LA, right?
Yeah, I was born in Japan, but after 8 months, I was 8 months old, my family moved to LA due to my father's occupation. His boss basically told him go to the US and set up the office there. So he went with the one-way ticket, and then my mother and I followed after. And then 2 years later, my brother was born there. And then, he was an expat, let's say. And, usually expats, they go back after, say, 4 or 5 years. But my father just decided to stay a little longer. He loves golf, so he plays every weekend. You can play all year long. And he just kept extending,
Wow.
and they're still there after 30 something years.
Dude, I'm so glad that story is kind of that you said that he stayed, because I remember when I spoke to Tony, his dad ended up going back to Korea, and honestly, when he told me that, I literally had tears in my eyes, when he spoke about how tough that must have been, and it's great that that everybody stayed together and that you guys were all in one place, and wow, yeah. And I guess there's much worse places than you could be in than in California, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys live in Los Angeles, or where about did you live?
Yeah, it's I would say the southernmost part of Los Angeles,
Okay.
next to Long Beach. It's Long Beach, San Pedro, and it's a really beautiful city called Rancho
Okay.
Palos Verdes. To me, it's still one of the most beautiful cities in the world, I think, personally. It's right next to the coast. It's a peninsula, basically. California doesn't have too many, but in LA, I believe it's the only peninsula. It literally just sticks out. So it's kind of like this secluded peninsula. It's high up on a hill. It's really nice. It's really private. It's mostly residential. My high school was like just on top of the cliff, overlooking the ocean. It was crazy. They filmed Pirates of the Caribbean right in front, and it's a big movie scene location. So it's weird because you're watching all these movies and then you're like, I know that place. I think even the very first scene in what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? The crazy one where it goes through different
Inception.
Inception, yeah. The very first scene where he's like passed out on the beach.
Yeah.
That's Palos Verdes as well. Yeah, a bunch of music videos are done there. But it's nice because it's really discreet, it's really private, it's really quiet. It's a really nice area. And now that I think about it, I was really blessed to have, grown up in that area.
Yeah, because you hear so many different stories and versions of what the experience is like growing up in California, because I always assumed that it would be like you've just described. But, there's some parts of LA which are, pretty rough. and people have a shit time. I mean, there's even parts
Oh yeah,
in Orange County which are not that great, right? I understand.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's great that you had that
yeah.
experience.
I mean, I was it was so I was on the high school basketball team, or I played basketball. Like basketball was my life before car design, so it was like my life. So when you play basketball, you have to go to all these neighborhoods in LA to go play with other teams and whatnot. And then that's where I saw like the huge, let's say, bandwidth or variety of neighborhoods. And then yeah, you go back home and it's like a completely
Mm.
different world. So growing up,
Yeah,
I saw everything, um, but that's the beauty of sports because you get to see things, you get to meet people,
yeah.
and a lot of what I base now it's because of basketball. It's the philosophy, the way of thinking, teamwork, all this. I got it from that.
Is that
I think.
where you kind of got your drive from?
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean it's I think people they relate to sports a lot when talking about drive and values and what's so not, but it doesn't matter what it is. If you can learn from one thing, you can easily incorporate it into another thing, whether you change jobs or not.
Yeah,
So yeah,
you hear that a lot, and I think it's not just in car design, but it's in business in general. The amount of like great businessmen and women are also pretty accomplished sports people as well. So yeah, it
mm,
makes total sense. There's so many parallels that you can draw from sport, and I think especially you mentioned teamwork, and that's such a I mean, it's become a buzzword, but I think it's in car design, but it's become a buzzword because for so long there's been this myth that there's some genius in the corner doing everything by himself, and it's important to highlight, especially to people outside of the business, that it is it's absolutely teamwork, and there's a lot of people involved in the process.
yeah, exactly. And it's really not easy. But I grew up watching the Lakers, with Kobe and Phil Jackson, and then I read a lot of um, Phil Jackson's book, like how to. It's all mental, so it's really theoretical. It's very principle driven, but trying to apply that in a, let's say, car design studio is really not easy. It's similar, very similar because of all the characters, but it's really difficult, I
How
think.
so?
Of course, I'm not like at that I'm not at that point yet, of where I'm managing like a team, but I would imagine it's difficult because as you know, many car designers they have such unique characteristics. It's like the Chicago Bulls
Wow.
team with Michael Jordan. You have to manage all
Yeah.
these characters. I think it's not so different.
I one of the I mean it's a massive parallel, but I think in any business, regardless of what it is, whether it's design or even like music business or something really traditional like IT or um, investment banking or whatever, at a certain level you're dealing with people, right? So your way in is kind of the skill set. So whether that be numbers or art or whatever, and then as you start to ascend through the ranks, it becomes it's totally a people's game, and the sooner up
Mhm.
people with aspirations realize that the better, and quite often the ones that do recognize that are the ones to really make fast advancement up through the rank, because they realize the importance of relationships, both above and below. Because the first, I mean,
Right.
you know, it's there's no denying that upper, like, you know, senior management, especially at kind of where you start approaching director level, is, you know, I'm sure the stress is absolutely immense. But in many ways, I know a lot of designers that have struggled a lot with, like, you know, first level of management, because they just don't understand it. So they think that because I've got really good at drawing a beautiful silhouette, or, you know, developing going into management, that it's a completely different ball game. You know, yes, as a lower level manager, you were still very much involved in the creative process, and you might even be still developing your own themes. But you've got to really, really pay attention to the people aspect of it, you know, and as I said, at the lower level, you know, you're dealing with your team below, who quite often you are their first port of complaint, should we say, and then you're getting shit from the top as well. And because you're still a junior manager, you still don't really have all that much authority. So you've got to really get good at balancing that, the pressures from top and bottom.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, in school you don't learn too much of this, because all you learn is design, which is fine. But then when you enter the business, you realize design is just 20%.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Yasu, like, what?
So
Yeah,
when did you decide, like, because you went to
I did.
Coventry,
Yes.
right? And you graduated, and then what, did you want to be a modeler?
If I'm okay, so
back
if I'm
then?
totally honest, I guess no. I always wanted to be a designer because I studied car design, obviously, and I had great aspirations to be like, you know, the South African designer. And I also had this vision of, like, you know, we've got, I don't know how much you know about South Africa, but we've got quite an established manufacturing infrastructure out there. Like BMW produce cars out there, so does VW, or they have in the past. So did Ford, and various other companies. And so I always had this. A friend of mine is I mean, he owns a steel company, but he was always like, he was a car nut at school, and I wasn't. I love cars, but for me, it was always about the aesthetic. So it's like, first and foremost, kind of art first. And I always had this. I mean, me and him used to surf as well when we were kids. So like, we always, when we were really young, we had this aspiration to own a surf shop together. And then as we got older, he's also like heavily into racing and whatnot. So then as we got older, I was like, well, dude, like, I could be the designer and you could be the engineer, and we could like be this great, you know, it's like young, naive dreams, but I guess that's where they all start. And we had this grand plan to, you know, create a South African OEM, which is, I mean, now it's probably a bit more believable, but it was for a long time quite a funny and naive thing, but a nice thing anyway. You know, two friends getting together with complementing skill sets. Julian Thompson talked about that, you know, where he said when he joined Jaguar, he had this opportunity to really help transform this brand, and he was going to do it with his great friend Ian Callum. And they were this brilliant partnership. And he had the same thing at Lotus as well. You know, when they did the Elise, the two of them, like him and a very close friend of his at the time, and they still are to this day, as I understand, he was an engineer and Julian was a designer, and they both had this like, this great partnership, that I very much dreamed of as a young boy. So anyway, fast forward to 2009, financial crisis is in full swing, and like nobody's hiring. And if you couple that with, I have to hold my hand up and recognize my shortcomings as well. There was very little information around as to like, what a good portfolio really looks like, and what the industry is really looking for. And in hindsight, like my work just definitely wasn't good enough. I realized that properly when I finally managed to wedge open the door at Jaguar. Like you could see, okay, that's kind of the level. And we got so many mixed pieces of advice, and I don't want to shit on Coventry any more than what I might have done in the past, because there were quite a few of us that did manage to get the exterior design roles. For example, there was a friend of mine, an old friend of mine called Hitesh Panchal, and he was one of the like star pupils in the year. You could see like he kind of had something in his sketching quite early on, and then he's also a really good talker and all that sort of stuff. And by the time placements came around, he managed to get in, and that's when you see what you need, to get a job. And that's why internships are invaluable. It's as you know. And in short, I had no idea. I didn't know that. I guess I didn't want to believe as well. It's difficult to have that kind of self-realization at that young age, but it just was, the work just wasn't good enough, and there wasn't enough information around. I had no connections to the industry as well, and fucking hell, it's like excuse after excuse here. But I've held my hand up in saying that it wasn't good enough. But no, we got quite a few of us got really focused on like getting a first class degree, like going for the grades, and especially me, given that I was so shit at school. Like my academic grades at school were terrible, like D's, E's, and F's. And when I got to university, something I vowed never to do. I was like, education's not for me. I'm never going to go and study further. Discovered car design, and it's like, you have to go to university. So when I got there, I was like, I'm here because I want to be here, and I'm doing a thing that I love. So I made sure that I did as well as I could. Graduated with the first, but in hindsight, I could have sacrificed some of those grades to make sure that, like, my sketching was fucking great. My alias was great. I couldn't use alias at university, so it's ironic that I ended up becoming a modeler. But if you factor in all the list of excuses that I've just made up, and the fact that there was a full-blown recession on and nobody was hiring, it the goal at that moment is just to kind of get in regardless, of what you're going to do. And there was I went and did an alias course, and I ended up getting a job at Jaguar in the design studio as a modeler. So again, in the beginning, I was like, okay, cool, I've got it now. I know what the landscape looks like. I'm going to work on my portfolio and try and apply to become a designer. But I also slowly but surely started to realize that maybe it's not all that it's cracked up to be, and that maybe it's not suited so much for me. I think I became at quite a young age, I was like managing restaurants, and I became quite serious. Like I was managing at like 21. I was managing men and women in their 40s, and you start, something happens, you start to become very serious, and and it kind of put me off putting on a sort of filter for everybody else. And what I liked about being a modeler is that given that 3D has also always been my thing, it comes very naturally to me. I realized that I could be 100% myself, and there would never be any consequences for that. Nobody I wouldn't have to play any political games to get to get ahead. Like, I saw that there were clay modelers, which are fucking amazing. I mean, Roy, don't forget the modelers. I forget what his surname is now, but he's the prime example. He's like a total joker, full of laughs in design reviews, making clay cocks and all sorts of stuff. But like, at the end of the day, he's got the skill set. I mean, Frank Stephenson said that he was the best modeler he had ever worked with, and he made the claim best modeler in the world. And there's so many real characters in the modeling team, and I kind of saw a synergy there that I could really relate to, and that I could just totally be myself. So and I liked that. So I just thought, and it was a lot more simple for me. So it's a very long-winded way of saying that. But that's basically it in a long-winded nutshell.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think is the future of modeling?
Well, I don't. It's a very difficult thing, especially when you start looking at all these AI tools. Not only are there word prompt image generators, but like Viscom, for example, they are also working on 3D tools as well, where they can actually develop rough volumes and whatnot. And now I think the same parallels can be drawn within design as within the 2D landscape as well. As that, I guess that's only going to work as good as the technology is. So, some people will say that clay is completely dead, and there's other studios that say, like, as long as we can, we're holding on to it, because there's certain things that you get out of the handcrafted process that is very difficult to replicate just purely in digital. And that's a conversation that will fucking go on forever. There will people that will fight to the death on both ends of those spectrum, and I'm indifferent to it all. I think both have got really valid arguments, but I think you can never say indefinitely, but I think that there's at least 20, 30 years where there's going to be a digital modeler now is like, it's like what the clay modeler was. I view it like that. I'm a total technophobe. One of the guys that I'm working with at the moment, he's like, I don't understand how you're such a fucking technophobe, but yet you chose to work with computers. And I didn't view it like that. For me, it's kind of, it took me a long time to learn Alias as well, because the interface is so unintuitive. It's so fucking complicated. And you like something as simple as like pick nothing, like, what is that? Now it's second nature. But I promise you, when I sat at university, when I was sitting in front of my screen, I remember staring at the fucking screen for like 2 hours, going through the palette and just not doing anything, not knowing, and just screaming from frustration. It's not obvious. So when I finally, I went on this course and I learned quite a bit, but just it was kind of a starting point. I ended up just choosing like a few tools that I use, and the rest I'm not fucking interested in. Like now I never use I might use a monorail, so like one curve and a generation curve and a rail curve. But if we're putting patches together, I almost never use square, never. I never use a bi-rail. I just use skins, you know, and play with a proportional crown and manually sculpt. But so it drives me crazy when Autodesk comes out every year and they say like, oh, we've got all these new tools. I'm like, how about you make something, it doesn't fucking crash, you know? Just do that. Don't give us any more tools. We've got all the tools we need. Just take the fucking millions of euros that you guys are making every second and make something that doesn't crash, please. And by the way, also make it easy for students to use the program without going through this complicated registration process. Because, you know, don't you think you guys are making enough fucking money, you know? So this frustration with regard to what the program's putting out, you know, even these image generators, you know, there's some cool accounts that have been created on Instagram where they've you know, through word prompts created a series of images, but you as the creative are always going to be the number one, the curator, so it's going to come down to taste, and you're always going to want to change details, you know. So I don't see a digital modeling going anywhere. And I dare I say it, I think clay is going to be around for a while. It's obviously been reduced a lot, and it's kind of seen as a luxury. But you know, especially with brands like Bentley, for example, or Rolls-Royce, or the high-end stuff, a lot of those studios will almost always use it, you know, as long as they can and as long as it makes sense. But yes, it's undeniable. There's definitely a lot less clay happening than what there was even 5 years ago, you know? Yes. Yeah. What how versed in 3D are you? Are you one of those guys that, do you like to build volumes, or do you prefer to stick with 2D and work with a modeler to develop the theme?
I do like 3D. I do a lot of Blender now. It was this like weird thing where in school, I think I got really good at Alias at one point. And then out of school, I didn't use it as much, so I kind of forgot about it. But then it picked back up again a little bit. But then now I'm in Blender. It was like, yeah, this weird transition where yeah, you just have to sketch more basically. But of course, it depends on which studio you're at. For example, when I think my first internship was at Volvo, and you know, it's your first internship. You think you're gonna go in a studio and see all these sketches, but they were so ahead that I didn't see a single sketch on the wall. Every designer was only doing Alias. It was crazy, and then everyone's model will be milled out in foam to see the proportions and design. And then, of course, I sketched a lot because that's what you do. But then it was full submersive Alias at Volvo. Some really good Alias. Well, they're not Alias modelers; they're designers. But all of them could do Alias.
Oh no!
And it was crazy, because even the chief, this guy I was telling you about, Geza Loxy, one of the coolest guys, original GM guy, true OG. You know, he was the chief of the studio, and he was doing Alias, standing up with his desk, and he was really good at it. And it was like, oh, this is the future, you know. But then it of course it depends. All studios are so different, you know.
Yeah. That's definitely true. Every studio is different, but I think, as I understand it, everywhere now is kind of almost insisting that designers are versed in 3D as well, in terms of being able to build their own volumes. And I understand it. I do, because we just don't have the time frames that we had before to develop themes. It's very, very different to 10 years ago. It's and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it is kind of what it is. It's you can't fight against it. The demands are just too high to churn out more and more work, and if you don't do it, somebody else will. It's that simple. But one thing that is I heard on a podcast the other day with Rick Rubin, who, if anybody doesn't know, is a very famous record producer. He did all the Chili Pepper stuff, for example, and hip hop and blah blah blah. He was saying that they've kind of got a rule in the studio that if you've got an idea, you need to show it, because you and I can have a conversation about something, and I can describe it. Okay, I definitely can't, because I'm fucking terrible at communicating. But you could have the best communicator describing a certain idea, and I could go like, yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from. I really understand exactly how you've said it, because it makes total sense, and I've got a mental snapshot of the information you've just given me. But then I'll produce something, and it could be similar to what you had in mind, but it could also be like 180 completely different direction. And then only then, when you see it in the physical, or I say physical, but only when you see the result, do you go, actually, it's not what I wanted at all. I can see how you got to that conclusion, but that's not what I wanted. So it's minimizing such scenarios like that, because you've kind of wasted quite a bit of time, because it might have taken the modeler 3 days to build something, and so I can, it is very useful as a modeler if you are getting a volume from a designer. But yeah,
it's like when you have discussions with your peers or your boss, you're talking about principles basically, and then it's up to each person to interpret that discussion or project brief. And that's where Blender's it's a beautiful thing, where you can communicate that basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's also, that's one of the great things. I guess that's one of the luxuries that you have as a designer, because I remember a mutual friend of ours, Tarek. Do you know Tarek Ashur? So he was saying that he said to one of his bosses that if you tell me to do, I would like you to explain to me what, like, I would like, if you want to go in a certain direction, like if you want a square, I would like you to say, like, I'm kind of thinking about a square. Can you create a square? But I would like the freedom to interpret that square, in the way that I see fit. So, with the, whether it be the radiuses or the crown or whatever it is, kind of give me some direction, which I think is important, like all good leadership should do, that it's not to the point of micromanagement, but there's a vision, there's like, we want to head in this direction. And then you as the designer it's your job to interpret that. And sometimes you come up with stuff that completely surpass the expectations of the whoever set the brief. And obviously sometimes not. but that's kind of your role in it, and also to be this conduit between modeling, design, engineering, marketing, etc., as the role of the modeler is kind of a little bit different, in an advanced scenario, you get designers that are quite happy if the modeler goes and sketches something and he goes, well, that's not what I had in mind, but actually that's pretty cool, let's run with that. But as you get later, further down the line in the process, it's very much the role of the modeler to help and interpret the designer's vision as closely as they're intended, So I can't remember what we're leading up to, but it's the point is that the point is that it's useful that especially if the designer's got a very clear vision, that he can kind of give you some surfaces to say, like, body side needs to go like this, this is what I want, can you, and then you build it properly,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. But Sam, what's going on with you? Like, where are you contracting now, or like, do you have bigger goals?
Yeah, I've got bigger goals, dude. I've got like I need.
I'm sure everyone wants to know.
I need a lot of money. With no, I do. Look, there's a lot of things that I want to do. We want to do films, like short films and maybe some long format stuff as well, if there's a really strong enough story. The podcast was never supposed to be the main thing, it was supposed to be a side thing to other things. And it's completely fucking taken over my life. It's been great. And there's a lot of good things that have come out of it, and the connections, that, and friendships as well that I've built. I mean, I mentioned the Bryden twins yesterday. I speak to those guys all the time. They've become really good friends, even though we haven't physically met, and that would have never happened without the podcast. And we've worked together briefly as well, and we hope to, possibly do some stuff together in the future as well. But that's just an example of some of the great things that have come out of this podcast. At the moment, I'm working with this guy who's also become a friend, Mark, who I mentioned, and and we're doing various alias projects through his company, and I am kind of
So do you have an agency or something?
Yes, I mean, it's all basically going through Mark. So we kind of work together and get projects in, and that's basically what we do, and that's and I do other contracts here and there as well. So that's what's bringing in the money. We still haven't worked out how to monetize this podcast because we've been looking. There's been some interest with regard to sponsors. The guys that have really aligned often don't have the budgets, and then there's people that have come along with money, but it doesn't align with what we're doing, and they want to start fucking micromanaging and trying to insist on getting certain of what I do. I'm still modeling, but I would like to do other stuff as well. We would like to do more films. I don't know if you saw the Clio V6 film that we did with Axel. That was a bit of an experiment, like very spontaneous. But it was like I want to tap into those those fucking great stories in the design world that nobody's heard of before. I'm sure. I mean, nobody. Unless you were in Renault, you wouldn't have known about that story. You know, I don't know if you watched it, but it was fascinating. You know, absolutely fascinating. Just, you know, this guy that has this strange idea, but brilliant, and tries it out, kind of fails, but then, you know, an OEM goes like, oh fuck it, that's a really good idea, I think we could do it, but, you know, in maybe a different way, and then it inspires a whole different thing, you know. And it's like, it's not to say that if Axel wasn't there, that project would never have happened, but it wouldn't look the way that it is, you know. It wouldn't the way that it does, and it wouldn't have. It, like he said, you know, he loved the Renault 5, and everybody loved the Renault 5, but the Renault 5 was like, you know, it was kind of like a modified. It was a. Sorry, the Renault 5 Turbo, but it was basically a Renault 5 with like flared arches, you know. And he said that he very much from the start wanted to create a completely different sculpture, a new body side, you know, and that's why it looks the way that it does, you know. So we want to do more stuff like that, and obviously increase the production quality as well, because that, you know, that was done pretty spontaneously with very basic equipment, just myself and my trusty partner Klaus. And shout out to Klaus as well, because without him, none of this would have happened. But I want to do more stuff like that, dude. You know, I love. I'm at the risk of quoting this for the millionth time. I love the Abstract series on Netflix. But I think that, you know, there's stories that can be told, in a different way, basically through our filter. And I would like to do more stuff like that, you know. And also the stuff that we did with Kiska as well, you know. I mean, these were just also, you know, podcasts, but, you know, we actually got invited to the studio, and we spoke to everybody in person inside, and we've not done that before, and that was pretty interesting as well. But we've got to kind of look at ways of starting to make money, because that's basically it. I probably fucking said too much, because I have that problem. That's also probably why I didn't become a designer, because I'm not economical enough with the truth. I kind of just vomit everything out. So that's I guess that's also why I called this unfiltered,
okay, yeah.
because I don't have much of a filter.
Well, what's the crown?
Well, crown is the car design term, you know, that if a surface is flat and you want more volume in it, you say, can you give more crown? When I was at Volvo, they used to talk about, can you give it more pump? But I fucking hate that. It sounds terrible, you know. It's not a real term, and I don't want to hate on them, because they're great people and obviously incredible designers. What Thomas and Max have done is incredible, but I also put it down to maybe the fact that you know, the Swedish influence, you know, it's not it's maybe a term that it might be a Volvo term, I don't know, that they kind of coined and it's stuck around, and then new people that come in, they don't use the term crown because they go, these guys are not going to understand it, so we'll stick to using the word pump. But crown, you know what crown is, you know, convex, so that's it. And I also wanted it to be, I didn't want the podcast to have the word car or design in it, you know, because for one, it's been overused, you know. I think if I was to ever have a proper company, I would never call it fucking Sam Designs or it's just like, it's too obvious and cliched and whatever. Plus, with the whole car thing, like I wanted to keep it open as well, you know, that like if we start doing like sneaker design, for example, we've had some guys from the product world as well that you're not limited by the word car. You know, it's like, it's definitely rooted in car design. We do car design, predominantly car designed people, but I don't want it to get to the point where we can't talk about anything else because, you know, we've got the word car in it. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man. It's good to know.
So yeah. But listen, enough about me. I've spoken way too much. We're supposed to be about you, and you very, very sneakily asked me all these.
Yeah, but it's okay.
No, but we want to know about you. So
no, because you know, you do all these podcasts, and then we don't know anything about you. So it's good that people know a little bit more about you too. No?
Everything that I've mentioned are all my, I guess, you know, I don't want to be like, yeah, I'm fucking Mother Teresa and I'm saving the world or anything. Everything that I've just mentioned now are all my selfish ambitions. You know, the selfless ambition is, which I believe can be there can be both intentions in whatever endeavor that you're doing. I also, as I mentioned earlier on, there was so much that I didn't know, that I didn't have access to the right information, to the right people, what it's really like in the industry. So these conversations were all intended to tell that, like, to lift the curtain a little bit more, you know, for young designers that actually really want to know, and also to show the cross section of jobs as well, because, you know, before sitting in a proper car studio, I only really knew that, you know, there's an interior designer, an exterior designer, and I don't know, modelers and engineers, you know, but we didn't know about CMF design. We didn't know about visualization and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of showing all of those things too, you know, and so the selfless part of me was kind of, you know, cutting through all the bullshit. So, like, you know, when I started out, there was no information, and now everyone's a fucking design expert. You know, there's so many design tutors and master classes and whatever, which I mean, I've yet to see a credible one, but I wanted to cut through that noise, you know, and without me saying like, this is the best, this is not a marketing exercise. You know, I'm not, you know, no one's scripted. I'm literally having conversations with a whole cross section of designers that are talking about their experiences personally. And from all those, you know, we've coming up to 100 episodes now. So there's so much quality that you as a young person can mine to work out, to draw pattern recognition amongst, you know, what are the common denominators that really make sense to focus on? Where are the myths, and how can I fit into all of that? You know, so it's very much, that was the selfless intention. Yeah. And if nothing else, you know, I hopefully people can just fucking laugh at me while I make a dick of myself talking to all these fancy people.
No, but it's really cool that you do this because, as you said, car design is not really a well-known profession. You know, people still think engineers design cars. So it's cool.
Yeah, that was that was a thing that I had a real hard time with when I started telling friends and family that I wanted to become a car designer, because it wasn't that anybody was saying like, you can't do that. They just didn't understand it. You know, they were like, oh, so you're going to go and, you know, become an engineer? I was like, no, designer. Oh, like graphic designer. No, car designer. And then, like, you know, people just didn't get it. And it was very frustrating at times because, as I said, I didn't know anybody, not only did I not know any designers, but I didn't know anybody that knew anything about it, you know. So even when I went to college to get access to Coventry, so I had to, like, in England, college is like, it's before you go to university. You guys call university college, but it's
school.
not. It's like you've got so in the UK in general. I didn't go to school in the UK. I went to school in South Africa, finished, and went and did a gap year in London, and then decided I wanted to become a car designer. So, but the school system in the UK is generally like you go to school till you're 16, and then you can either go on to college, or you can stay on at school and do your A levels. And then when you've got, it's that period between 16 and 18, generally speaking, and then you go on afterwards to go to university, i.e. college. So what was I going to say? So even when I went to college, which I went to in the UK in Surrey, they didn't know anything about car design at all. You know, they knew it was a thing, but they didn't know anything about it. So like there was I did a foundation course where, you know, you did graphics, you did ceramics, fashion, and also printmaking, which I really enjoyed, fine art, and I don't know, something else. And then you specialized in one thing, and you would build a portfolio around that, and you would use that to apply to get into university. And I had a fine art tutor, a guy called Dave Pawitsi, I think that's how you pronounce it. Great guy. And he was the first person to teach me about ergonomics. And so it was like very product design based, but it was very useful in terms of thinking and problem solving. And that was the first time I heard problem solving. I didn't understand what that was. And he was like, "Yeah, Sam, you do this thing that you've just built here. You've been problem solving a certain thing, you know, like we were doing, like making it's weird shit, like, I don't know, new milk cartons, you know, different ways of designing milk cartons, or what else did we do? Meal trays for airlines and stuff like that. And as someone that wants to do cars, of course, you know, that can be boring and frustrating, but it teaches you to think from a first principles approach, you know. So I learned a lot, and it was a great experience. And again, we've gone off on a totally fucking abstract tangent, but yeah, I forget where this was going, but whatever. Yeah, that was kind of it. Yeah.
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 Interesting.
So, dude, listen. We need to talk a little bit more about you, Yasu. So, you basically
okay.
you're a Los Angeles native. You know, we could say. I mean, born in Japan, but grew up in LA, and your parents are from Japan, obviously, but you've moved around quite a bit as well. You were in Paris for a long time, which I'm sure contributed to your very sharp dress sense, and now in the UK. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in France? Well, what that was like?
Well, I can start
From the beginning.
That's okay. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, so I wanted to become a car designer, let's say, I knew in high school. But of course, it's never a straightforward path. I didn't know about it. Of course, you know, the first thing you look into is like, oh, there's graphic design, there's product design, there's architecture. And then I was never a car guy, but I liked cars. And then you're like, you see these drawings of cars and you're like, what are these? And then you look more deep into it, and then you realize everything is under this umbrella of industrial design. And of course, like many people, you say you want to be a car designer in high school, and everyone's like, yeah, no, or what's that, or are you sure? Are you sure you want to do that? I was told by one teacher, maybe you should go to a normal college first, you know. But it's fine, you know. It's because people just don't know about it. But the I was really lucky, I would say. I was really blessed because the city I grew up in, Palos Verdes, it's right next to Torrance. I don't know if you
I
know
do
of
know
Torrance,
Torrance.
but it's where Honda is. Faraday Future's there now. It's Canoe is there now. But back in the day, it was Honda. And later, I found out that a friend of mine that I grew up with, his father was in charge of Honda Advanced Design, and he had gone to Art Center. So I was really lucky in the sense that my my parents were like, "What's that?" But then they were like, "Oh, actually, your friend's father is a car designer." And then so they saw that, oh, you can actually make a living out of it. Because like all, I think most car designers, I was not a good student. It's all, you know, C's, D's everywhere, F's, you know. Every test result I get feels like a D or a C, you know. So in high school, I would say all my friends were just really smart. They all went to a good college, and they were always in these advanced placement classes in high school and honors classes, and I was always in just the basic one, like barely surviving,
Yeah,
if you know
I
what I
do
mean.
know.
So at that point in high school, I was like, what am I gonna do, you know? Like, and then, you know, of course, art was the thing, and then you're in art class doing paintings and ceramics and whatever, but then you're like, you gotta think pragmatically, like, I can't make money with this. So then you start looking, and then you find industrial design. But then, as I said, I was lucky because I found car design, but then at least I knew someone that did the job. And then I talked to my parents, and they're like, yeah, actually, when you were growing up, the first friend you had in the US, her father was a car designer too. And then they started mentioning, because they're all Honda people, like, oh yeah, and that friend's father was a clay modeler, and that friend's dad was a designer. And I'm like, oh, so I've actually, they knew about it, but they never really mentioned it. So yeah, that's how I got really lucky. And then the great thing also is the environment, as you know, which has a lot to do with your upbringing, is that there was art center an hour away. So of course you go visit, and then you visit the student gallery, and the first impression, like many people, is like, shit, it's so
How
cool,
do you
but
do it?
it's so good that I can't do it. Yeah, I was like, I can't do this. But then I think I liked it so much that I just kept looking into it. And then there's Art Center offers high school classes actually on Saturdays. It's called Art Center
Right.
High back in the day. And actually a lot of the guys you've interviewed, um, it was these young kids that knew that wanted to go to art center from an early time. So like Dan, Tony, Albert, all these guys. We didn't know each other, but we were taking these high school
So
classes, I
you guys were
believe.
all in the same class.
So it was like these young. We were not in the same class, but we all had the same teachers, I believe, because I, I don't know if you know, but art center, there's a lot of older students. So a lot of them had like gone to a college before and they're like, I don't want to do whatever they were doing. And then they went to art center later on. But then there was this group of younger kids, let's say, like this group I just mentioned. We knew we wanted to go to art center, so we were in all these high school classes. My very first teacher, Tony Yao, he taught the very basics of industrial design. He taught product design and transportation design, which is what it's called there. And then he was really good because he was like a no bullshit kind of guy. He was like, this is how art center is gonna be if you get in. If you can't do it, I'm gonna let you know. This really old school art center. If you do 10 pages a week, if you do less, you do double the next week. So that was really good because it just gave you a taste of what art center was going to be like. And he was one of those guys. He's a product design guy, but he started as transportation design and switched over to product design, I believe. And I think he's one of the biggest toy collectors in the world now. But he was into like toys and that kind of thing. I think he was like in the beginning of art center doing tape drawings next to Kareem Habib. But then he switched to product design. But that was really good because I would say he was my first teacher that kind of gave me the taste of what art center was like. And then you just basically retake his class over and over. Because every class you have a different project and you just keep doing that. And then that's how I built my portfolio. And then he was like, yeah, I think you're ready, it's fine. But then I decided to go to community college for a year to get a lot of my GEs out of the way, the general education stuff, because it's cheaper. And then you can transfer those credits when I actually went to art center, so that when I went into art center, I can just focus on the design stuff. So that's what I did. But that was, I would say, my first start. And then my friend's father that I mentioned, who was in charge of Honda Advanced, he introduced me to the chief of Acura at that time, Johnny Ikeda, who was my first car design mentor. And this was in high school, you know. Wow. So he's an art center guy too, and he did the Acura TL, the original TL, the cool one. The good thing was everyone was pretty straight up with me. He's like, if you're not serious about this, just don't do it. It was, you would expect like, yeah, you should do it, But it was, nobody was like that actually. They're like, you gotta be serious. You can't mess around. Even when you enter art center, the teachers tell you straight away. Like my first teacher was Scott Robertson. He was like, all these guys, they're like, if you're not serious, just go buy a house or go buy a Lambo with all this money you're spending. So it was like straight up, direct. They let you know how it was, And even the fact that it's like, if you're at art center and when you get out, you're representing art center, so you gotta be super professional and all these things. So it was tough from the start, let's say, but it's good because you really have to be serious.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard quite a lot of stories, and I think that there's, as I said, a lot of great things that Art Center does, and I have yet. I don't want to say obviously can't speak for every single graduate, but I have yet to meet an art center graduate that doesn't have the goods, you know. So I mean, as I said, the Viscom classes alone, I mean, I don't know that there's anywhere else that does Viscom as good as Art Center, and I hazard a guess at saying it's probably due to the fact that they are getting professional designers in, and a lot of different ones. It's not just one guy. You know, there's so many designers that I know that do it. The Brighton twins, Jordan Meadows, okay, Scott, I think he's more in entertainment, but he was a tutor. Marek Georgievich as well, Ian Cartabiano, and these are like legendary designers. You know, guys that are amazing, and I just think at how different our experience would have been at uni if they had got in people from Aston or Jaguar, Land Rover, Bentley, etc., to come in on a regular basis and teach those classes. Because I mean, it's that's a very, very valuable skill. You know, I think it's a cop out that a lot of universities do, not just Coventry, but there's a lot of places that have this mindset of like, well, you know, you need to work that. If you're serious about car design, you need to work that out yourself, you know. And I think it's bullshit. I think you know, it's very narrow-minded to say that, you know, if we teach you how to draw, you're only going to draw like that. It's like, no, there's some fundamentals that you need to be shown. You know, how to really construct a beautiful, juicy rendering, if you want to talk about color, but and communicate reflections and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, things like, you know, tuning, getting a silhouette right, you know, establishing proportion, stuff like that. You know, all of those fundamentals are absolutely imperative for a young person to learn. And I think that Art Center, I don't know anywhere else that does it as good. You know, I think there's another place that I've mentioned a few times. It's ISD Rubica in France. And the graduates that school churns out is also really, really good. I think one of the things, as my limited understanding, is that they are able to simulate a real world design environment very, very well. So they kind of, from quite early on in the course, they start, you know, getting students to think about where is it within the car design space that you think that you would fit in, so that you don't find yourself at the end of your program going like, I wanted to be a car designer, but actually I think you know, this whole visualization thing is really interesting to me. They kind of get you to think about that early on, and as a result, as the course progresses, the projects are simulated in a way that you are doing exterior design, I'm doing alias, Frank is doing visualization, and together we are all kind of specialists in our own area, and we are going to do this great project together, which is obviously how a real world environment works. And as a result, you can, you know, the kids that come off that course seem to have not only the skill set, but, you know, a great understanding of the process, and I think that that's invaluable. I don't know what their Viscom classes are like. But you know, again, I've worked with a few interns that have become designers from that school, and it was very impressive as well. But yeah, Art Center really missing for me.
Yeah, and I want to say that, you know, it's really about the environment, I would say. I know we talk about these great teachers, the school, but then, as my good friend Jason Hill says, it's your class, it's your peers that push you to push each other more than anything else. And yes, I have to give it up to all these great teachers at Art Center, because they, if you think about it, they, after work, they'll drive an hour to Art Center to teach a 2-3 hour class, and they have families and whatnot. And some of them, they come in Saturdays, and it's a commitment even for these guys, I think. But it's you really appreciate it,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really cool. But I have to say, I mean, I would hope so, given how insane the fees are as well. And it's
Yeah.
but it's good. But I again in the UK, and this is, I mean, this goes for all universities. There's the fees of, they're still not at the level that the fees are in America, but when I studied in England, the most you would pay as a local student is like, I think it was like £1,000 a year, and now that figure has gone up to, I don't know how much, but it's like, I think it can be anywhere between 7 and 10 or even 12, depending on where you study. And the thing that I keep asking is like, where's all that extra money going? And I think that on a course like car design, well, you've got a moral obligation to make sure that some of that money's been allocated to bring in professionals to teach these young kids how to do it properly. What's really expected of them, not what some person that used to work as a designer 20 years ago thinks, or some graduate that couldn't get into industry that has now got a job in the university thinks what their perception of a designer needs to be, or what good design is. I mean, this is. It also became pretty infuriating to me that where people were so, there was at times a real emphasis to talk about, like, what is good design, or is it really art, and all these like bullshit intellectual things that are nothing more than dick measuring contests, where you are trying to come across more intelligent than the next person and read into things that aren't even there. But the person that thinks, oh, well, I'm the best because I've just won this debate, he still doesn't know how to put a fucking card together. So what's the point of all of that? Are you so and that was, so that's why that was also something that I really liked about the modeling as well, is that I could just, like, I don't have to engage with that bullshit, and yeah, it's just, yeah, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. So, then so you go through Art Center, and up until fourth term, which is halfway, you learn all the basics, and then you're allowed to apply for internships. Wow. And then my first one, like as I said, was at Volvo, which was really cool. Some really good people there. And then afterwards, I went to Mercedes in Carlsbad.
Did you work on that Silver Arrow concept? Is it called a Silver Arrow?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was with Jack. Wait 1 second.
Jack White.
Sorry, my computer needed some battery. It was with Jack Lutic.
Okay.
He's another designer, but I was an intern. But yeah, a lot of people worked on that project. But But it was really cool because, back in the day, we had this LA Design Challenge, which they don't have anymore. But it was just a great opportunity for like designers to express their full-on creativity. If you remember those projects back in the day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember that project specifically because I've never really been a huge Mercedes fan. And I remember seeing that concept. Actually,
Yeah.
that studio put out a few great concepts around that time. But they also did this like biomimicry thing, which I can't remember what it was called, but it was also like it was like a white car that had kind of a robo race architecture to it. I forget what that thing was called, but that was cool. But I remember seeing that Silver Arrow concept, and I was like, Jesus, this is something this is a Mercedes that I can get on board with. That was a really cool thing. And I guess, I looked, and I guess some of those sketches were yours as well, which is just mind blowing. It's insane meeting the person that did some of those things all these years later. Like it was also the same with meeting Nikita as well, because I had seen, when I was at university, I'd seen some of his sketches online, and like me being the idiot that I was, I immediately developed this like internal dislike for this person because it was so great. And I was jealous because I couldn't do it myself. And I was like, yeah, this guy's got to be an arsehole, whatever. Then I only found out, like, not long before I did the podcast, there was fucking 2 of them. And both of them are like incredible designers. And then, the point is, you see these sketches and you forget that there's actually a real person behind these things sometimes, especially then. And it was just incredible to meet them, and now I'm meeting you after seeing your sketches all these years later. So it's pretty impressive. But that Silver Arrow project was really cool, really, really cool. I think it still is really cool. That thing could come out today, and you change a few of the details on it, and it's be fresh as anything else. It's really, really cool. Beautiful sculpture, great proportions, and just awesome, incredible.
Yeah, we pushed a lot, and it was that time where like everyone was talking about Maya too, and it was a lot of that was done in Maya,
Wow.
the actual model as well. Not not me, but there was this one modeler who was doing it, and
What was
it
his
was
name?
cool
Do you remember?
because it was like we just no. I should, but yeah. No, but yeah, it's we pushed a lot, and as you say, it's like when you are at art center, it's like you always look at the graduating class. It was it's called the 8-term studio, and you always go there to see like who the superstars are,
Right.
and you just know immediately, right? And then everyone's like, oh, what are they gonna do for their final thesis, and what are they doing?
So who was some of those guys?
That's also the beauty that
Do you remember?
as you said, the twins. There was a really good class. It was with I don't know if you know, but it was with George Yu, Kimberly Wu, Bradley Arnold. All these guys were really Alex Gerard.
Alex Gerard. Shout out to Alex.
But yeah, he doesn't know
I
me. But,
I
yeah.
worked with Alex for a bit when I first came to Potsdam.
Anyway, yeah.
Great, really, really good guy and great designer. Really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was like, Richard Kim, I don't know if you know Nick
Another
Gronenthal.
name.
He's head of Volvo US now. I mean, actually the first time I got a real car sketch demo was, when I was taking these high school classes. I took this class called Industrial Design, very basic. And the teacher, John, he was he was an environmental design guy, but for some reason he was working at Design Works, BMW Design Works. And then at the end of my first class, I was getting really frustrated because I was taking all these high school classes, but I wasn't getting a sketch demo of a car. You know, it was like cubes, spheres. And I was like, when are we getting to the car stuff, So I go to John at the end of class after everyone left, and I'm like, I need a car sketch demo, like now, like I really want to see one. And he goes, I'm not a car designer, but I work at Design Works and I know someone. And so he was like, all right, meet me at the main campus, because the Art Center high school classes, it's at another campus. It's like, meet me at the main campus, meet me in the 8th term studio. So we meet, and then we open the door, and there's like this really tall guy in cowboy boots. And that was Nick Gronenthal. And then John's like, oh, this is some high school student. Can you just give him like a quick demo? He was like, really nice. He's like, yeah, sure. And he does this really simple sketch line drawing of a Ferrari. He did it in like 10 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. And I was like, what?
Incredible.
And then he just kept doing it more and more. It's still one of the best sketchers I've seen to this day. I was just like, just the amount of perfect indication. I was just like, what?
Like it's what you leave out as well.
There was no like colors. There was no. Exactly. It was a simple line drawing done in 10 seconds. I was like, how? What? And that was. But it's important. You get a taste of like the level, and you're just like, man. I gotta get to that point, and then now he's like a big guy at Volvo. But it was really cool because when I graduated, all the professionals, they come to see the work, and then he was there, and I told him, like, yeah, you gave me my first sketch.
Did he remember?
Of course, he doesn't remember me. No.
Wow.
These guys are too high up, But yeah, him, and like people like Richard Kim, who's also one of the teachers. It's just, you have all these guys above you, and you're like, you just want to get to that level, So you just keep striving and striving, just hoping that one day, you'll get to that level. But yeah, that's the beauty of Art Center. You have all these great teachers who are committed to come to school, after work, to just teach the students,
Yeah, it's very cool.
And you just can't get that anywhere else, because it's this environment in California where you have so many studios close to each other. Whereas maybe in Europe, it's not easy because the studios are so scattered everywhere.
Doing it, but for me, the thing with Coventry was looking back on it. It's a real shame because they kind of have that there, right? You have Jaguar, you have Land Rover, you have Tata, which might not be such an exciting brand, but I mean now it is. But they've had some incredible designers there. Bentley had a studio at CGI there for a while. Okay, maybe not when I was there, but the point is, and Aston Martin as well. Once upon a time, General Motors had a studio there. Julian's now opening up a new version of that. But there's no end of people that could come into Coventry, you know, and I'm hoping that, you know, that they start doing that, you know, because as far as I understand, they still haven't really, you know, we had, I think in 4 years, we had like maybe 3 talks, not sketch demos, but just designer coming in and giving a presentation about what that particular brand was doing at the time. And I fucking remember all of them. One of them was Ford. They just done the Fiesta, and at the time, it was like everybody was so excited about that. You know, it was this where they brought out this kinetic. They called the kinetic language. It was like after. It was the first time the Ford Mondeo was in the James Bond film. I remember, like even the Ford Mondeo was like vaguely cool, and they asked basically what Ford did at the time. They said like, you know, we want this car in the film, and I'm guessing that the James Bond Enterprise is like, no fucking ways, and he's like, well, can't use the Astons then, you know, and that's how they managed to manipulate the product placement of the Ford in that film. But, you know, it didn't look out of place because at the time it was a pretty cool thing. But I remember one of the presentations was some guys from the Ford UK design studio, which, I mean, it was okay, but it was more just a young group of guys trying to show off, really. And then we had a fucking really, really interesting presentation from a guy called Richard Seymour. And in London, there's a well-known design studio, product design studio called Seymour Powell, and it was co-founded by this guy Richard Seymour and another guy called Dick Powell, who's a phenomenal designer in his own right, and he's published books and all sorts of stuff. But this Richard Seymour you've never fucking met anybody like this in your life, like just borderline. I don't know what the word is. I mean, I wouldn't say genius, but a very, very smart guy, an incredible communicator, and a true visionary, like really true visionary. I mean, they back in, when would it have been? 2006, maybe. They showed a concept that looked like the cake bikes today. You know, it was literally like that, where you would have a battery that you would pull out, charge in your apartment, like all of that stuff. Talking about that, they showed us, there was an animation that they did of a kind of, there's a space company that's doing these not hot air balloon trips, but balloon trips out into space. And they would show, they gave us a presentation on like the future of tourism in the future, when you know, you go up on this big kind of like Zeppelin thing into the middle of orbit, and it was just incredible. And his talking was just, it was so compelling. Like I remember that talk till today, and his vision for China as well. I mean, I guess it probably would have been quite obvious to a lot of people that were in the know, but it wasn't really until after Tesla came along. I mean, it wasn't up until like 10 years ago, maybe, that people really realized that, oh fuck, like, you know, China's going to really take over everything, you know, in terms of their ability to produce shit. And it was only a matter of time before they started to develop their own language and way. And to say something's made in China it's not like this this derogatory remark anymore. You know, everything is made there, you know, to really high quality as well in certain circumstances. Yeah. And he was saying, like, you know, somebody asked him, like, what is your advice for designers or like, you know, the future? And he had one sentence, and he was like, learn Mandarin. That was it, just that. And And then he went on to elaborate
Yeah.
what he meant. And but yeah, so I mean, and the third talk that I remember, there might have been a fourth, but the third talk that I remember was another fucking presentation by him as well. And that was it, you know, in 4 years, 4 fucking years. So for me, it's kind of, you know, that was also a huge motivator to do these conversations, you know, because I also look at, you know, shit like, I don't know, I've never said this publicly, but Car Design News as well, you know. This is a paid publication. Who the fuck pays for that shit, you know? Like, and it's, I just, you go look at any of their videos and nobody watches them because it's like, what are you guys talking about? You know, that like statistics about, it's boring. It's for businessmen, like, that think they are car people. It's, so this was a real, like, strong motivator for me to go, like, let's just cut through all this bullshit. Like, kids are tired of listening to that crap and some convoluted marketing spiel that they've told the design director, who's quite capable of talking himself, what he should say to the camera, you know, to sell more product. I mean, what the fuck is that? So anyway, I'll get all riled up about that. But that was a huge driving force for this as well.
Yeah. Also, I think what people don't talk about either is like, yeah, you have your car design courses, but the great thing is Art Center is also a great product design, entertainment design school as well. And you see that stuff, even film, you know, like Michael Bay is from Art Center too. Like that influences you a lot, actually. And the great thing is you can take their classes too. You can customize your curriculum. So I took a lot of entertainment design classes, a lot of color theory classes, because what I like about car design is storytelling. It's a lot of storytelling. It's what we're doing basically. So who's the best at that? It's the entertainment design guys and girls, you know. So and rendering wise, you have to render a car in an environment. They're the best at that. So that's also the beauty of it. At some point you can design your curriculum. You can have, let's say, independent study. So there's like, let's say you have a teacher that you like, and you do independent study with them. You do a project, whatever you want with the teacher you like. It's like stuff like this. It's just, to me, it was priceless, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those are really valid points as well. And what I noticed as well, like if you talk about rendering cars and scenes, there's a good friend of mine, Jung Preschutti, who is he's a designer at Toyota in Nice, and he's incredible at doing stuff like that. And he studied architecture originally, and a lot of architecture students that have transitioned into transportation are so great at that, you know, really telling product, like placing the product into a scene. It brings another level of not necessarily realism, but context, you know, so that you can understand it a bit more about what is this vehicle actually going to be used for, especially if it's something new, you know, like, yeah. Storytelling. Exactly. Yeah. And again, this is, I mean, I've said this before as well, but just something that really wasn't obvious to me, you know, wasn't, nobody, I don't remember anybody ever highlighting this, you know, talking about this. So, that's yeah, it's good that, you know, that hopefully people are a bit more, young designers are more privy to that sort of thing. You know, storytelling, communication, color theory, you know, all these things. You know, and yeah, man, that's
There's a guy. Do you know a guy? There's a guy named Craig Mullins.
no, I don't.
He's like the godfather in the entertainment design industry. And he was originally studying car design at Art Center. And he's like, still to this, he's like the best, you know, in entertainment design. But yeah, if you can try to get him, it will be so crazy. Yeah. If you can interview him, because he was like one of the first to do these digital renderings. I think I always I used his work as reference all the time. But yeah, he's like the godfather in the entertainment design industry. Like, I think he's like just crazy good.
Dude, that's.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I'll definitely look it up, Yasu. I mean, this is something as well that I mean, we mentioned briefly on the phone yesterday that I'm kind of like, I was really envious of a lot of, I guess probably a lot of art center guys as well, that there was a real, there are some commonalities in the style of sketching, but everybody's developed their own style ultimately. You know, you guys have learned the rules, and then you've bent them. Like, I mean, as I said, I mentioned Dan yesterday, like, it's just, there's nothing traditional about the way that he does things. Like it's like art, but you know, you can still quite clearly see the design intention. You know, there's so much you can pull from it, and he's forged his own style. And then, I mean, dude, I was looking at your easy sketches from the Renault concept that you did as well, and that's like, I see a bit of this and I see a bit of that, and you've also somehow forged your own thing in that as well. And I for us, again, it was my naivety, but to me it was like, well, if you're not doing like stuff exactly like, I don't know, the old school Harley Earl style rendering, then like it's bullshit. You know, you're not doing it properly. And I was really envious when I saw more sketches like that were just mind blowing, like that were completely tearing up the rule book, but you know, totally credible, you know, as design illustrations. And I think that like, you know, I never had a problem with thinking outside of the box, but there was always, for me, what was always lacking was the credibility to illustrate it in a way that didn't lack the level of maybe professionalism that would be required in a proper design studio. And so, yeah, it's I mean, I still get really excited when I see all of those things, you know, still to this day. And that's why I said, like, I really am like, fuck, dude, your sketches, I mean, those, particularly those Renault sketches that I saw of that concept were just so cool. I mean, you see, it's like a really good pencil sketch, but then there's like watercolor.
Thank you.
You feel uncomfortable.
But yeah,
sorry.
No, at our center, after, let's say, fourth term, or let's say, you know, you have 8 terms, fourth is in the middle, and back in the day, fourth term Viscom was still on vellum chalk manual. And at that point, you're already trying to establish a style. And then when you go into fifth term with Ian Cartabiano's Viscom, you go into digital. It was like half-half still at that back in the days. But then you slowly get into digital more and more. But then it's really stressed, like, what's your style? You know, we really try to break it down. And it's really direct, like, that's working, that's not working. You know, maybe that sketch is too much, I don't know, cartoony, or it's too much this. Maybe this sketch is the right level. And then the next week you come back and try to match that style more and more. But then you keep developing it. So when you go into sixth term with, I think, John Kristesky, he's head of Genesis. With John's class, you're full digital, but the whole term you're developing a style digitally at that point. So it's interesting that you recognize that, because it's really stressed, and you have to find your own style. You know what I mean? But it's, of course, it's like influenced by, at the end of the day, it's your taste, it's what you like, and then you try to you show yourself in the rendering.
Dude, it's totally true. But this is what I'm saying. It's like, you know, there's a level of, I don't want to make you feel more uncomfortable, but there is a level of brilliance in your work and Dan's work, and fucking Wojtek Bachleda as well as another example. You know, completely different design, but you look at that and you're like, it's unbelievable. But he is kind of, you know, really forged his own thing. So like, the level of credibility has not come at the cost of sucking your personality out of it. It's like the brilliance is undeniable, but there's still real character, and they're obviously doing something right, you know, and the fact that they emphasize that you should find your own style is I guess a lot of studios might not have always been very receptive to that. I know that Ford, for a long time, they were very insistent that a rendering look a certain way, like this, so that everybody almost had the same style. This like bottom lit, you know, and that's cool. But if everybody's doing it, it quickly becomes not so cool, you know. And I think that they've maybe broken away from that a little bit. But you know, again, these are things that I wish that that we had a bit more knowledge of. You know, that you don't have to have your personality sucked out of your work. You know, in fact, it should be very much the opposite. Now it's obvious to everyone, but it was not so obvious 10, 15 years ago. You know, so it's great that you guys had that insight. You know, and you had real people, real designers that could say, Yasu, I see what you're trying to do. It's very cool, very creative, but it's still not quite good enough. You know, you just need to, there's certain things that you need to tweak to make sure that it's good enough. Because once it is at a certain level, you know, that's a designer or a design director seeing somebody applying that's got that level of brilliance, but they don't necessarily do something in the style of the studio, the way that company policy within design dictates. That's the kind of thing that will break the mold, you know, for them to go, oh, fuck, actually, yeah, no, this is stupid. Like, why should he not put watercolor on his images, you know? Why should they not put gold accents here, or give a street art feeling to it, or render with just a cool gray 4 and a highlighter, you know, and an ink pen, or in Dan's case, a fucking quill. I don't know, but you know, this is And now it's, I mean, it's, as I said, it's kind of, it's really obvious to everyone, but it was not always so obvious. And it's great that you guys had that insight.
Yeah, and then like I think every internship influences you too, because I was doing all these digital renderings, and then when I went to Mercedes, um, my boss was like, I don't like your stuff. You should go back to manual. So it was like a shock, because like I thought my renderings were okay. And he's like, your sketches are just so much, my manual sketches are just so much better than your digital stuff. So it's like, oh, shit. So then I decided to do like half-half. Line drawings and then render it digitally. And then he was like, yeah, that's much better. So that influenced a lot as well. But then for me, the big jump was like, or the most difficult part was trying to get your digital renderings as fluid and organic as your hand sketches, which I think a lot of people have, you know, this same problem. It's like this hump that you have to get over. But yeah, that was one thing. But now, today, I believe, this is just my opinion, but I think it's good to have 2 or 3 styles. And the reason for that, I think, is with this, let's say, mobility push right now, you have all these cars that are a little bit more architectural producty. You know, like Stefan style, Stefan Janin. So you have these 2 styles, like traditional car design, which is more sculptural, and then you have this other architecture style. So I'm not saying that there are only 2 styles, but today I believe you should render in the style of the design you're designing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I personally, I cannot render a design that's architectural in a sculptural way.
Okay. Yeah.
So today I developed 2 styles. One is like a traditional car design style, and one is like this Renault sketch that I've done, more architectural producty style. So I have 2 styles now, and depending on the project, I use one or the other. Because in school, you're taught you have to have one style that's really unique, that's your own. But now I have 2, depending on what kind of project I'm doing. You know what I mean? Because design trends change. So if everyone's doing, let's say, organic now, but in 5 years everyone's doing something less organic, more brutal, then your style should change, I think, a little bit. Because you basically have to render the design in the best possible way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Look, the whole topic of design trends is like another thing for me, because, well, I'm going to go back to your dressing now, right? The thing that I said for me stuck out about you is that you are, you know, I guess there was maybe a time where everybody else was smart dressed in the room, but I see pictures of you all the time being the only guy who's dressed to the nines around people in, you know, black t-shirt, black jeans, or, you know, more hoodies and tees, or whatever the case is, sneakers, and that stands out. So on the subject of trends, I would have assumed that if you it's useful to have two different styles, but I would argue that if everybody is going in a certain direction, that you would then have another style in your back pocket to stand out for that, not necessarily to fit in with what the trend is at the time.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Tell me something. How? I guess you spent almost 8 years at Renault, so that must have had a huge impact on your developments as a designer. Because I saw some sketches of yours that kind of looked a bit like Jan Azel. There was a red Jaguar D-type sketch that you did that was kind of done in that Jan sort of style. And then, like, for example, the stuff that you did on the EZ project, completely different. Can you talk a little bit about how you were influenced there?
Yeah. Well, can we?
Yes.
Can I answer your first question of how I got
Absolutely.
to France? If
It's
that's
totally okay.
So out of school, so I had applied to Renault out of school, but they didn't have a spot. So I decided to go to Calty. But after school, doing interviews, I did an interview at Ford. And of course, big Thomas Freeman was in the room. And he was like, he looked at my portfolio and then like, yeah, it's cool. But then he was really direct. He was like, you should go to a headquarter. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know why he said that at that time. Now I know why, but I was like, yeah, you should go to a headquarter. And that kind of stuck with me. And then I went to Calty, and after a year, Renault was like, we have a position now, do you want to come? So I was like, hell yeah. Because I've told Stefan this, but I went because of Stefan, basically. Because, his stuff is the best, one of the best. So, from even during art center or during school, art center has this style. And then maybe everyone else in the world had something similar or whatever. But then you had this one guy in France doing something like completely off. It was architectural, it was producty, it felt like there was substance to it. There was, you just look at it and you're like, shit.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I gotta work with this guy, And on top of that, you had like Lawrence, you had like Anthony Lowe, you had these legends, Just those three guys. I mean, there are more, but you just have those three guys and you're like, man, I gotta be there. And that was when, Lawrence just came in, he changed the whole Renault, he refreshed the whole Renault brand, with all this organic surfacing, and then you're just like, whoa. And, you remember those times, and then everyone was like, whoa. And then I was like, I gotta get there. So I get there. I was 25 years old. I left, and then I got there. I didn't know anyone. And it was a culture shock because it's so different being there. It was just so different. And then, you have these legends like Stefan, But then I didn't work with Stefan until like my 5th or 6th year there. because he was in charge of advanced, or he was in charge of concept cars. But then I was like, I gotta work with this guy. But then you see his stuff all the time. And like people in that position, they're supposed to inspire your team. But he would show his stuff, and then after everyone would be depressed. It was like the opposite effect, because everyone's like, now what,
Yeah.
So you just look at it in shock, and then just like, okay, I can't sketch anymore.
He's one of those rare.
But yeah, but
no, carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Carry on.
Well, but yeah, that's how I got to Renault, and then yeah, but it was a big learning curve, because just the way they did things, it was so different from the US, I think. And the French way of thinking and doing things was, I still don't know how it is, but you're just immersed in it, and you're just like confused all the time. But my goal was to do something with Stefan, and finally did it. But yeah, it was not easy per se.
I mean, the thing, I try to put it into words, and I'm not always the greatest at this, but the easiest way that I could sum it up is like, he makes a traditional style with a real soul. There's like very architectural, very producty, but it's not stiff. It's almost like engineered art in a way. Like you would imagine, like, I don't know, if an AI, the best AI bot was drawing a wireframe, and then you could take that wireframe and put it into Photoshop and just give it a bit more stance, a bit more crown in the sections, and just completely perfect this thing that's almost been machined. That's his sketches don't even need any color. They've got, like, you put a splash of an accent here, or like a gradient in the background, and it just, those things are amazing. And he's still doing it today at his age, at his level. It's very rare that you get a design director at his level that is still churning out that kind of work, because they kind of get inundated with all the managerial stuff, as they should. But yeah, he's, again, a guy that I've quoted in the past from Jaguar, Matt Bevan, he came up with a theme for the original F-Type and the CX-75. That guy in the shadows, nobody really knows who he is, and he's really senior management / on junior director, if you will. And his, as I understand it, still to this day, he's sketching. You can still see the real passion in it, and keep up with the hottest young designer in the studio, sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, and anyway, speaking with Stefan was just, again, I got so much out of it, just listening to him and hearing him draw parallels between fashion as well and car design, where, I mean, just what a guy, really, really, really smart, doesn't need to prove himself, and just effortlessly just talks about the most interesting and thought-provoking stuff. And the work that he produced, like, manually at Renault back in the day, was just mind-blowing. But I mean, he's evolved his style a little bit, but it's still very much, the actual, if you break down the sketch of it, it's still very manual, with a few digital accents. But I love his work. I love his work.
Yeah, he's a special guy.
So did you learn to speak French, Yasu?
Very basic. I'm sure, yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's good at all.
And were you...
I don't want all my French ex colleagues and friends to be watching this.
No, I can't.
Yeah, his French was shit, yeah.
Well, that's kind of like me in German as well. I've also been here, we've been here since 2005, so it's more than 7 years, and my German is still embarrassingly limited. So I've got to make an effort, got to do it. But yeah. And you were living in Paris?
Yeah, I was living in Paris in the 15th district, and then after that a little bit, I want to say outskirt, but not really. It's still kind of Paris. I was there 7.5, 8 years. It wasn't easy,
No.
I would say. Yeah, it was tough, but it was a lot of learning.
Yeah, I bet.
It felt it was a learning curve, not just at work, but outside of work, just living there. Yeah, just a lot of stressful times, but yeah, let's say it's a lot of learning.
Crazy expensive though as well, right?
Yeah, expensive on a car designer salary. Just tough because if you don't speak French perfectly, it's not easy. I was hanging out with Dayan a lot because he lived close by. We would hit up all the coffee shops because we love coffee, so we were like trying every coffee shop in Paris. Went through a lot there.
Where did you meet?
But yeah, it was. I mean, the thing was.
No, finish. The thing was.
Yeah, no. The thing was. Yeah, I wanted to do. I mean, the Renault show cars were the best, so my goal was to do a Renault show car, So I left LA to do that, and then of course to work with Stefan, so I was able to do that. So in the end, it was all worth it, I would say.
But I guess very hard, huh?
Yeah, I mean it's for a designer that moves around internationally. I think it's always hard because every new place you go, you have to prove yourself.
I do. Yeah, I do.
How it is.
I really resonate with that because, especially as a modeler, you generally move around quite a bit more than if you were a designer, right? And I always have this anxiety going into a new place, and I feel like I'm the worst fucking modeler in the world. Like, and you, like, you nobody knows you, so you put all this internal pressure on yourself to prove yourself, in the beginning, and it's difficult because, you've got to do that at every new place. So I can totally relate to that. But then, you find your feet and it's all good. And I think in the long run, that is an incredibly, incredibly healthy thing to go through. I've seen I've seen both extremes. So people move around a lot where they go through that. There's a balance. You don't want to move around too fucking much because then you're also the guy that can't stick it out anywhere, you know. But generally speaking, like, you know, in the way that you've done it, for example, you go and spend like, you know, 5+ years in a place and then start over somewhere else. There's plenty of people that in your position that would have just ridden it out like forever, you know, because it's convenient. There's a clear progression. Everybody knows you, and you kind of you're just building on that credibility that you've already built up in that environment, you know, and you know that at some point you're going to move up and up and up, and everything's going to work out fine. But to go and start over as things are starting to get like really comfortable is that's a very healthy thing to do, because it does in the long run. You're going to be a much better, not just a much better designer, but a better person. You're going to have a stronger character, you know, to be able to go through these situations, and it's a very positive thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a very positive thing. It's not the easiest, but it's nothing worth doing is easy, and nothing that's easy is worth doing. So, yeah. There you go.
But do you want to move?
I mean, if I had my way, I'd move back to South Africa. But I mean, it's not that simple. You know, my daughter's just started the second year of school, and we can't really just move around because, you know, dad fucking wants to try something else. I mean, I guess if I really wanted to, I you know, fought with everyone, i.e. my wife, then, you know, maybe it would be possible. But it's more, you know, you get to the stage where you realize that, yeah, it's important that you're happy, but it's probably more important that the majority of the family is happy, you know, because that's going to influence your happiness a lot as well. Yeah. So right now, it doesn't seem like we're going anywhere, but I miss the ocean a lot. I miss the people, and I don't know. And I miss England as well. I never thought I would say that, but I became an adult there. You know, I've got a lot of great friends there, and yeah, there's some great things about England. And I miss it a lot. You know, it's definitely. Yeah. I never thought I'd say that, and but it's, you know, a lot of who I am is because of the experiences that I've had there, and I also kind of like the fact that, you know, you can just, I don't know, even if you're in the fucking Midlands, you know, you can be in Wales in like 3 hours, you know, surfing. Not that I did that every weekend, but I mean, you know, for example, you know, London's an hour away, dip in and dip out, and I do miss it. I definitely miss. Not being I miss being able to, you know, destroy somebody in a confrontation, you know, like and it sounds a horrible thing to say, but you know, not just being able to defend myself properly. You know, some guy on the street over here gives me shit, I don't have the vocabulary to tell him to fuck off without telling him to fuck off. You know what I mean? That's what's so great about England is that you can, with very minimal words, you can like put somebody in their place, you know, and I kind of miss that. Not because I like to do that, but, you know, every now and again it's very necessary, and I can't do that at all here, so I feel a bit like useless at times. Obviously, because I'm being lazy and I haven't learned German properly. But with that said, I should probably enroll in some lessons and do it properly. I was kind of arrogant with it. I thought that, you know, because I speak Afrikaans, which is one of the South African languages, and it's Germanic, very similar to Dutch. It's pretty much a dialect of Dutch. You know, I would just pick it up organically, and I understand a lot of German, but you know, there's a lot of similar words, and they mean completely different things, and you still have to learn the vocabulary and the grammar and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I've got to make an effort. Yasu.
How long have you been there?
7 years. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But I mean, dude, there's
Yeah.
some. I mean, there's some really great things. I mean, the system in general, I think it's good. You know, it's really, really good. I like the ratio between, like, just if you take taxes, for example, you know, in the UK, you obviously pay less taxes, but you know, the NHS, for example, is not that brilliant, and education is I mean, there's good education, but I mean, university, for example, you're going to really pay for it, you know. And then if you go the other extreme in Scandinavia, where you're paying, like, depending on how much you earn, like 50+% in tax, you know, sometimes as much as 60. I mean, you can't argue with what you get out of it, you know. But I think that Germany is somewhere, for me anyway, is like a healthy balance between the two extremes. And yeah, I mean, our little guy's got like a ton of allergies as well, and he's been had to rush to the hospital, like, when we thought that, I don't know, he's got like dairy and eggs and nuts. Like, all of these things are lethal for him. Like, if he has it, he can literally have an anaphylactic shock. And, you know, if he's not treated in time with adrenaline and God knows whatever else, you know, you can get yourself into a real serious problem. And we've got like a children's unit around the corner here, and we can go in there day or night, no problem. And he'll get seen virtually immediately by like the fucking best doctors, you know. And it's not to say that doesn't exist in England, but it's not quite as accessible, and as I wouldn't say it's as good as what it is over here. You know, that's a really important thing. Childcare, for example, and it's supposed to be a car design podcast, but I guess, you know, these are all useful things for designers out there. But yeah, I don't know, like I know that childcare in England is crazy fucking expensive. You know, like I believe it's somewhere like £1,000 a month for like full-time childcare, which is outrageous. You know, it's not the case over here. And yeah, so generally speaking, taxes are a little bit higher than the UK, but you're definitely getting a lot of value out of it, and it's also not as extreme as Scandinavia. So the system's great, and you know, generally speaking, at least it's where we are, there doesn't seem to be as much of a strong contrast in classes. You know, everybody's kind of generally doing pretty well, doing okay. Even people that are low income still have a good life, you know, and as a result, there's, you know, it's pretty safe, you know, and you know, parks are generally used as they should be, and not for like shooting drugs and all sorts of shit. So when you take your kids there in the morning, there's no syringes and glass on the floor. But yeah, and not to say that that's what you see all the time in England, but it has been known to happen. And yeah, but I miss England a lot. I love England, and yeah, I don't know. We're surrounded. I mean, dude, the lifestyle over here is also really good. You know, in terms of just where we are specifically, like, surrounded by water. There's parks everywhere. There's bicycle lanes as well. So, you know, it's safe. I mean, kids as young as 7 are cycling by themselves to school, and that sort of thing, like that level of independence and automation that you can have at a very young age is, that's also priceless, really. So I guess I just have to man up and make the most of it,
Yeah.
That's not to say that if somebody out there has got like a really fucking amazing amount of money that they would like to pay me, that I wouldn't be open to negotiation. But I think for the moment we are sticking around.
Good.
Yasu, I think we probably need to wrap up, dude. We've been going it's going on to like 2.5 hours now, and I've fucking definitely done a lot of the talking, and probably said too much on a lot of different things. But it was a great chat, obviously, because otherwise we would have been done in half an hour. So there was a lot of great things to unpack, and it's great to, as I said, put a personality, because I know what you look like, but to finally meet you, and albeit virtual. Is there anything else that you want to say, or advice that you would like to give to the young people out there? Is there anything else before we wrap up?
I think I've said most of what I needed to say. Just if you're a young person that wants to be a car designer for some reason, just be astute, just be smart, and just make sure you want to do it, because that's the advice I got, I guess. And Samuel, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Hopefully we can meet in person.
We will,
next time.
Absolutely. Yes.
I love your podcast, so
thank you, dude. I appreciate it. Thanks, Yasu.